The question is that the amendment be agreed to, and I call the member for Nichols.
Thank you very much, Deputy Speaker. This would be laughable if it wasn't so serious. This biosecurity protection levies bill is based on an unfair and completely flawed principle, and that goes against the ethos of encouraging entrepreneurship, small business and primary production. And that unfair and flawed principle is that the business owner, in this case a farmer, must pay for the cost of his or her competitor importing product into the country to compete against them. What sort of government does this to people? People who are out there trying to create wealth, jobs, economic activity, and in this case, fantastic Australian-grown food. Now, what's in these bills? Well, the government's package of 3 bills seeks to impose a new biosecurity protection levy to be payable by certain producers in the agricultural, fishery and forestry industries in Australia. 2 of these bills seek to implement biosecurity protection levy or charge to be inflicted on Australian farmers to pay for biosecurity activities which are undertaken by the Department of Agriculture, Fisheries and Forestry. And the 3rd bill, the Agriculture Biosecurity Protection Levies and Charges Collections Bill 2024, will enable the collection of the levy, and the biosecurity protection levy will use each industry's proportional share of total gross value of production. So, for example, if the GVP, the gross value of production of an industry sector, is 5% of the total GVP, then producers in that sector would collectively contribute 5% of the biosecurity protections levy's revenue. And commencing on 1st of July this year, Labor's biosecurity protection levy is expected to collect around $50 million per year over the next 3 years. The principle of making farmers who are already doing it tough pay for their competitors to import produce into the country to compete against them is just another example that this government is anti-agriculture. And I ask this Labor government, what do you hate about farmers so much? They're doing a fantastic job out there in electorates such as mine. And it's really, really difficult work. And they don't need the government working against them. But the government are working against them. I'll give you some examples. The Murray-Darling Basin Plan, a plan which was developed over a long period of time. Both sides gave a bit, and I can tell you my electorate gave more than a bit. It gave a huge amount of irrigation water, was removed from production to be put into an environmental account, and that takes wealth away from communities, because when water isn't being used to grow commodities, then all of the people who are employed in the production or the sale of those commodities don't get employed anymore. That's had a huge impact on my electorate of Nichols in the wonderful Golden Valley. But this government's decided that the deal that was already done, which already saw a huge amount of water taken away from productive use in my electorate, doesn't go far enough, and now they want to come after another 450 gigalitres. This government's torn up a program that the previous coalition government put together called the agricultural visa, welcomed by people in my electorate, particularly in the dairy industry. Wonderful families coming from overseas, working in our agricultural, on our farms and in our agricultural industries, and the Ag Visa gave them a path to permanency. And that was welcomed not only by the agricultural businesses and the farms, but by the communities that nurture these people who come from overseas. And this has led to an over-reliance on the palm scheme from the Pacific Island. And even though that can't fill the estimated workforce shortfall in the agricultural sector of 172,000 people. Then there's the ideological and reckless decision to ban the live sheep export industry. Now, I don't have live sheep export in my electorate, but I did go on a fact-finding mission to Western Australia to talk to people, and I went over there, I must say, yes, I'm a Nationals member, yes, I believe in regional industries, but I had an open mind about live export. What I found was an industry that has seriously cleaned itself up over the last 15 years and put in some of the most incredible measures around animal health and looking after those sheep who get shipped overseas. I met with the vet working for one of the companies. I met with the stock people. I saw a ship being loaded. I talked to the people out in those regional Western Australian communities. the ridiculous thing about this one is that there is a market for live sheep in the Middle East, and we've got to accept that. Now, if we're in it, then the live sheep that come from Australia get treated well, with world's best animal welfare standards. If we get out of it, they'll source the live sheep from somewhere that doesn't have our animal standards. So for the activists, it's fine for sheep to be mistreated just as long as they're not Australian sheep. I think it's an ideological decision and it's ridiculous. There have been billions cut from regional funding. Whole programs have been scrapped. Infrastructure projects that are necessary for regional communities, in particular in a place like Nichols that I represent, road projects which were essential to getting produce from farms to processing facilities or to the Port of Melbourne where there can be exports. Those projects that the previous government set up have now had the money withdrawn from them. Infrastructure, and policies also that, for example, the attack on the pharmacy sector, particularly the regional pharmacy sector. You might think, how does that relate to agriculture? These agricultural industries only exist when there are communities and community infrastructure there to sustain regional communities. Now, on top of all of that, the Labor government wants hard-working Australian farming families, people who are getting up a lot earlier, I would suggest, than a lot of people who work in this place, and that's not to denigrate them, to milk cows, to pick fruit, to prune orchards, to put grain into the ground. They want those families who are already doing it really tough to pay a levy to fund biosecurity, to fund the people who are going to bring stuff in to the country to compete against them. And their overseas competitors will import produce that carry a biosecurity risks. So they should be the ones to pay. If they want to import stuff into this country, that's fine. But they should be the ones to pay for that. And I just might bring up too, the fact is that this is being debated here in the Federation Chamber. Now, this is not to denigrate the Federation Chamber or you, Deputy Speaker, but my understanding, talking to colleagues, is that controversial legislation such as this, and important legislation, was debated in the House. I think the fact that this has been put in the Federation Chamber indicates just how little Labor thinks of agriculture and controversial agricultural bills that should be being debated in the House of Representatives, but it's sort of up here, out of sight, out of mind, like agriculture itself. Now, I would like all the Labor MPs listening to this, my friend from Tangi here, but all of the Labor MPs who are listening to this, next time they go to Aussies, the Trough, the members' dining room, and go and get yourself a plate of food, before you grab your knife and fork and hoe in, just have a look at what's on that plate. Have a look at what's on that plate and think about what people went through to get that onto your plate. There's salad, there's meat, there's fish. All of these products, the dairy products particularly, the amount of work, the capital, the labour, the risk, I would argue more risk than any other business, that Australian people have gone through to put that on your plate is significant. And the people who do that need a government that's going to work with them, not against them. This is an example of a government working against them. So I do. Everyone who goes to the Trough today and gets one of those good salads, just have a think about what people went through to get that produce onto that plate. Now, I worked in agriculture for a number of years before coming into this place, and this is what it's like. Really long hours and really hard work. Hard physical work, but also mentally it's tough. And mentally it's tough because there's a lot of seasonal and climatic pressures. There's a lot of price variability, and there's a lot of market insecurity. So a lot of people sort of ask, okay, why would you do it? Why would you do it? Because we believe in Australian agriculture and because we believe that it is a noble profession, and putting food on the tables of people around Australia and the world is one of the most satisfying and noble things you can do with your life. Yes, farmers want to make money, of course. The profit motive is there, and as it should be. But the reason people put up with some of the things they have to put up with is because they love doing it and they believe in it. Farming is in people's blood. And you don't have to be born into a farm for it to be in your blood. There's people who are born in cities who go out to farms and work on farms because they want to do that noble thing for their fellow Australians, which is produce food. Now, what you don't need, on top of all of the things I just described, long hours, hard work, seasonal climatic pressures, price variability and market insecurity, you don't need your government working against you. You don't need that. And the perverse outcomes we get from this too, Deputy Speaker, I mean, it's a fresh food tax. I mean, this is just another tax. Farmers have got to try and pass all these costs on, and this is just but one of the many costs. Governments and state governments and federal governments always look at farmers, often look at farmers. The previous coalition government was an exception, and I wasn't in this place then, but I was working with agriculturalists, and it was a good government for farmers. They haven't got a good government now. But they look at farmers and they say, how can we clip the ticket on the way through? How can we get a little bit more money from them? And they always say it's a little bit. The member for Moreton saying, it's only a little bit. It's only a little bit. But every government's in there trying to get a little bit. And it makes it more difficult to run a farming business. But then farmers then say, well, we've got to try and, if we can, we've got to try and pass this on. And then it becomes a cost of living pressure because food becomes more expensive. It becomes more difficult to grow. It becomes unprofitable in some cases, and we lose farmers. Now, if we lose farmers, we have less supply. If we have less supply, and I saw this in the dairy industry in my electorate, then the price goes up and people will pay at the checkout. Now, I'm sure a lot of the conversation and the debate, particularly from the Labor Party, will be about we need strong biosecurity. I know that. I worked as an agronomist. I worked in pests and diseases in orchard crops. I've seen the ravages of, for example, a disease called fire blight, which affects apple crops in the United States. It can decimate the pear industry, and if the pear industry was decimated in my region, that would be a terrible outcome because the Goulburn Valley produces over 95% of Australia's pears. So, yes, we need a strong biosecurity regime. We need to keep things like fire blight, foot and mouth, all of these things out. This debate is about who pays. It's about who pays. Now, there was a much better solution that was proposed by the previous government, a container levy. Now, the principle of that is you make the importer, the person who wants to come in and compete, and we're a trading nation, so I'm not arguing for protectionism. We're a trading nation, and if we want to send our goods overseas, we've got to wear the fact that people are going to try and import goods, agricultural goods, into this place to compete. But our system said to the Australian farmer, we're going to make the person who's importing the food, we're going to make them pay. This new piece of legislation makes the farmer pay a proportion of that, and it is a deeply unfair and flawed principle. The Leader of the Opposition announced this, the Leader of the Nationals, the then Agriculture Minister, announced this policy prior to the last election, and it was going to be a container levy on the importers. And that would have been a fair outcome. It would have meant the people who are competing against our Australian farmers, who want to make a profit out of bringing stuff into Australia, and good luck to them. I'm about the free market and I'm about a market economy. But if they're posing the biosecurity risk, they're the ones who have to pay for it. Sounds fair. Sounds fair. This policy is another attack on agriculture and regional Australia by a government that just doesn't seem to understand life beyond the suburbs. And this Labor government sees primary production as a cash cow to exploit rather than an industry to nurture. Thank you, Deputy Speaker.